Welcome to the Anti-Pattern Podcast, your ticket to the revolution in digital thread technologies. Please welcome, live from Mannheim, Germany, your hosts, Christian Muccio and Michael Fenning.
Hello and welcome everybody again. This is the Anti-Pattern Podcast, and this is Christian, this is Michael, this is Elevating Patterns. We are back in Mannheim with our already 10th episode. Something to celebrate? Maybe something later. Small. You also have to celebrate the small things, right? True. And today we are going to talk about BS.
Again.
I guess everybody knows what BS stands for. Well, I'm not saying that out loud, right? I'm not sure if children are listening. So in other words, we want to talk about the myth of enterprise software, so to say. And you just a couple of minutes ago said we want to be the mythbusters, right?
Yeah, if we would name our episodes after TV shows, then we would definitely be the Mythbusters today.
Oh, really good. Yeah, I liked actually the show of the Mythbusters. So let's try our best to bust a couple of myths today. The idea is that we collected 10, right? There will be more, right? But we collected 10 basically myths that are told by salespeople of software vendors and marketing folks that are, if you look into them a little bit more close, are not holding up or that are definitely not true, so to say, right?
Or not true anymore.
Or not true anymore, right? So this is what we are planning for today. And let's just, get started. What is the first myth that we identified?
So the first myth, we were talking about it a couple of episodes ago, is definitely the fairy tale of standard software.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There are still sales guys out there who would like to tell you that their system, no matter if it's ERP, PLM, you name it, is a kind of standard software and you can use it out of the box. So this is definitely wrong from our point of view, because these kind of systems are mainly about your business processes. Yeah. And nobody knows the business processes, your business processes, better than you.
Yeah.
Or isn't it?
No, definitely. And that leads to the second myth, right? Because what that would require, that standard software would just be used out of the box, right? That would require that software vendors actually better understand your business process, right? And that's not the case. It's never the case, right? I've never been in a PLM project where out of the box software was, just used, out of the shelf, and you have you did not have to modify anything, right? That never ever happens. You have always to configure it. You have always to add something to it, right? Or you have always to decide what is it that you want to leave out from your process, right? So this is something that is definitely a myth, and the software vendors do not know better than you do, and your guys do, right? Consultants, on the other hand, they can help you, of course, right? Identify, best case practices, what is it that others are doing, right? But they cannot decide for you, right? In the end, someone working for your company needs to own the process and own the tool set. Right? There's no way around it, right? It is the way that it is, right? And that also leads to the third myth, basically, right? Which is connected to it.
That there are still people out there telling you that customization leads to the loss of upgradeability. Yeah. And that's true for crappy software, which was never meant to be customized. Right. And this is exactly the point why we are taking much effort into the meta model of our system and to describe many things in the meta model to enable these low-code and even no-code configuration, which allows you also as a customer or with a partner to customize the system as long as you follow the rules of the meta model.
Yeah, and actually it's really funny. It's actually in real world the other way around. And that is the standard software that has been built 30 years ago, the standard software, right, was not built with configuration customization in mind. They build it statically, and now people bought that and used it and identified, we need to add something, and then they added some programming capabilities, but it was not part of the core. It was something that was added later, right? And it basically in the same development environment, and that led to a situation where you actually can say standard software led to the fact that things are not upgradable because they did not build in the configuration at first, right? So it's not that if you configure, you cannot you cannot upgrade, right? That's not the case. If you use something that is not configurable, then you end up in that problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if you look into those systems, right, other salespeople will tell you also, buy my tool, and buy my tools basically, not just one, right? And they will talk to each other without any problem. Because other tools cannot that easily talk to our tool. It's such a technically challenging thing to do integrations, right? And this is also basically BS because it's not a technical issue. And today it's even more easy if you look into cloud native technologies, webhooks, RESTful APIs, right? RDF, you name it, right? Integration and connecting systems has never been as easy as it is today, right? So we definitely would say it's not a technical issue today. And we also would say it has never really been a technical issue because the main issue has always been that existing software vendors do not want to open up their APIs. So that's not a technical issue. That's a problem designed into the tool because they want to lock you in. They want to lock customers in. They can only use their tool and nothing else.
Right. Yeah, which leads to the fifth myth.
Oh, yeah, 5 already. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is API function calls are not published because they are intellectual property and therefore protected.
Yeah.
Which is totally BS because, you obviously you have a function call, API function. It's just not documented, and maybe someone finds it by chance. And to go one level deeper, I recently, when we were in Berlin, I heard the myth from a sales guy who said we cannot publish any data, so not functionality, data on the API because it touches intellectual property. And what integer or string or Boolean or whatever you publish on the API would lead to the disclosure of intellectual property.
Yeah.
The intellectual property happens in the black box behind the API. That's exactly the other way around. The API is there for encapsulating the things behind in the black box, or to make it, now not encapsulating, but to make it accessible.
Accessible, yeah, and that's exactly the point. So in other words, in the black box itself, there may be functions, right?
Yeah, sure.
Functionality that is protected by some kind of IP
Algorithms,
because they developed it, right?
Absolutely fine.
Right, but it has nothing to do with the API. The API is there to exchange data. And what I find the unfairest in that whole scenario is it's not the vendor's data, it's the customer's data. It's your data, right? So, and you have the right to get it out and in whenever you want, right?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the vendor. It's your data, right? And so saying that you cannot expose it via the API basically means you have data in our system and we are not giving it to you, right? This is really critical. And luckily, the legislation in the last years is actually pointing into a more interoperable, in a more open direction, and it's getting better and better for us in that regard. Right. And that leads us to the next myth, right? And that is, there's one big system, right? Bring everything in one big system and you don't have any integration issues, right? I guess we already talked about this as well, right? To some extent at least. And this is also not true. Why is it not true? Because that would require that all of the data models in that really big system are consistent to each other, right?
Yeah.
And I've, seen that from my experience, it's not the case because there's department and department and department, and they're building their own functionality and they fight against each other, even if they are working for the same company, right? And they have some overlapping functionality, right? Yeah. So this is not true. This would be an oversimplification of the problem, right? And therefore, it actually doesn't really matter if you just use one big tool or multiple tools in that regard, because you have those problems everywhere, right? And you have to sort them out yourself most of the times and fix them, right?
Yeah, next myth is there is no cloud, there is just anyone else's computer, which is told by people who never got the idea of cloud and cloud native technologies.
There are actually t-shirts with that sentence on it.
Yeah. And yeah, there is this little truth behind it that if you run your application in the cloud on AWS servers or whatever, wherever, you're running it on somebody else's computer, but you don't know which one. You can have as many computers as you want, more or less. So in other words, scalability as one cloud native technology, which, yes, of course, you can also have on cloud native technology on site, on premise, in your cabinet, but that absolutely makes no sense.
Doesn't make sense.
So
and say it, to say it easy, in brief terms, this sentence basically means that the ones stating that wants you to think that from a technological perspective nothing changes. You only move data from operating it internally to someone else's computer, right? And basically nothing changes, just somewhere else, right? But that's not true, because as you said, cloud native technology has been developed to support a more distributed computing approach, right? And there is a lot of really great stuff out there that makes it possible, right? Cloud maybe not be the best term, to be honest. It's a marketing term for what you're doing there. Distributed computing, maybe a little bit better, right? But the technology behind it is really great, and we are really lucky to have them around.
Yeah.
Right. And cloud, this is the next thing. Cloud comes from klauen, which is German for stealing, right? Indicating that the cloud would be less secure. Right? And that is also a myth, because we are actually, from experience, or we learned that over the last couple of years, basically, the cloud is actually more secure. And I give you one example. I had a customer a couple of years ago, and they were hacked by hackers with some ransomware attack, right? And they were, encrypting a couple of IT systems, and they wanted, to bribe or to, get some money out of them. And in the end, what they ended up with is a list of all of the affected IT systems, and the ones in the cloud were not affected, and the ones on-prem were affected, basically, right?
Classic.
Classic. And so, in other words, it's not true to say the cloud is less secure, right? It's more, there is more technology out there to actually make it more secure, right? And if you hand over some of the security operations to external people, especially if you're a small company, right, then you can benefit from the experience that they have, because training your own people in all of that complex stuff when it comes to cybersecurity is really expensive and really hard for a small team, right?
Yeah, next myth is product data is not a performance critical thing, which is again true, has this little truth in the core. If you are only looking on one silo, maybe. Yeah, it doesn't you don't care when your engineer waits 10 seconds longer on an information. That's true.
Right.
But if you're thinking bigger in a connected digital thread over the whole life cycle across all your IT systems, then it gets much more performance critical.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you have by design so many interconnections between the systems, and if each and every system waits 10 seconds longer or a minute, or
that adds up.
Then you're waiting for a complex query
a long time,
minutes,
depending how complex
hours,
the situation
days,
is.
So you're not gaining all the advantages of a digital thread, and therefore you're getting performance critical.
Yeah, and if you look at it from a historical perspective, so to say, as we stated many times, we want to realize the PLM concept without building another PLM monolith. We want to only build the core component, which we call digital thread, right? Digital thread system. If you really want to bring together all of the silos, engineering, manufacturing, and operation, right? And bring that together in a graph, in a huge graph, right? Then the number of relationships, the number of interconnections, as you said, is so huge that traversing through it is a performance critical thing. I know companies complaining about 7 levels of BOM because that's too much to traverse through. And if you look into...
That's just one silo.
That's just one silo. And if you look into the whole, let's say, digital thread, RFLPT, whatever, right? Then this is not just 7 levels, it is more than 20 levels, right? Or even more, right? Yeah. So all those levels and then connect it and make recursive operations on them is a performance critical thing, right? And you cannot do it in just one big RDBMS monolith. It's not possible. Yeah. Right, and that leads us to the 10th myth and the last one for today. And that is systems are only getting more complex and you cannot change it. So depending what you think a system is, right? That is maybe true for the systems that you are developing with the software, so to say, right? Technical systems, right? There is a clear trend that things are getting more complex because you want to add more functionality, right? And the more functionality you add, the more complex it gets, you know, to some extent at least, right? There is a clear trend in that regard. Is that also true for the tools that you're using to develop your software, your systems, right? So the software behind it, and I don't buy it to 100%. Why do I don't buy it? Because the monolithic tools that have been customized, even if customization was not, part of the plan, they are very complex already. And if you want to add something to it, you have to touch so many different pieces because basically everything is connected, right? There's a lot of spaghetti in it, right? That you pull that here and the whole card of, house of cards is collapsing, right? This is something that can be done easier if you have a clear meta model defined, right? If you only standardize the meta model and not the data models, right? If you have an automism between the meta model, the data model, and the API and the UI, right? So in other words, you add something to it, some entity, property, whatever it is, right? It will be exposed via the API automatically. It will appear on the UI level in some regard at least, right? Without having to decide, without having to code here, to code there, to code over here, right? You just add it in a no-code way and it will be available, right? That makes things easier. And our strong belief is this is, from an IT perspective, a radical simplification, right? Makes maintainability easier, makes extensibility easier, right?
And we see this already in the software engineering world.
Yeah,
these tools are so nicely, tightly, and quickly interconnected via integrations because they are open, because they have APIs for each and everything, because they have webhooks. And this is at the moment unthinkable or very rare in the PLM world.
PLM domain. Yeah, I do agree. So in other words, things getting more complex, unfortunately. Sometimes you really cannot do something about it, right? But we don't buy it for the IT systems that you're running. We can do it easier and we can make it better for you guys. That's definitely the case. So with that being said, thank you very much for listening in. This was 10 examples of what we identify to be myths that are not 100% true. I would say they are wrong to a large degree, at least.
Yeah. And if you know more, write them in the comments.
Please write them in the comments, right? And we can create another episode out of this. Thank you very much for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel wherever you are listening to it. And then see you next time. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.